Thank you. Good morning. I'm grateful to the organization of the Responsive Cities Symposium, and I wish to thank them especially for offering me this opportunity to talk to you today about what UN Habitat is promoting in urban development and resilience. To frame the context, just let me remind you that UN Habitat is the United Nations Agency for Human Settlements. It is mandated by the UN, the United Nations General Assembly, to promote socially and environmentally sustainable towns and cities with the goal of providing adequate shelter for all. That's why I find that it's quite interesting that we are present here and we can share our current situation with you. As we all know, towns and cities are growing today at unprecedented rates, setting for the good and the bad the social, political, cultural, and environmental trends of the world. In the 1950s, only the third of the world's people lived in cities. Just 50 years later, this rose to 1/2, and it will continue to grow to 2/3, 6 billion people, by 2050. Being now home to half of humankind, cities are the hubs of much additional production and consumption. They concentrate economic and social processes that generate wealth and opportunity, but as well, they also create disease, crime, pollution, poverty, and social unrest. In many cities, especially in developing countries, slum dwellers number more than 50% of the population and have little or no access at all to shelter, water, sanitation, education, or health services. This is the world we live in. Growing cities are one of the most pressing challenges that we are facing. The global community that deals with urbanism in the 21st century. The consequences of spontaneous urbanization compared to the opportunity that offers sustainable development can be millions of people at risk. It is essential that decision makers at all levels, from local to national to supranational, understand the power of the city as a catalyst for territorial development with direct impact from local to national scales. UN Habitat is calling for a drastic transformation of the manner in which cities develop over the next century, to harness the positive power of urbanization to drive development that is equitable, inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable, to borrow from the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goals on cities. To do that, our executive director, Dr. Joan Clos, that is very well known here in Barcelona, is advocating the new urban agenda. And the new urban agenda is a quite common sense document. At its core, this agenda seeks commitment from national and local governments to transform the manner in which cities develop over the next 20 years, and sets in place new paradigms in sustainable urban development for the next century. This strategic vision is anchored in a three-legged approach towards sustainable urbanization, namely rules and regulations, urban design, and financial plan. Rules and regulations have the power to shape the form and character of the city. Constructing an integrated policy, regulation and law is the only way to address the challenges of urbanization and enables local governments to generate and implement the transformative agendas to become sustainable, resilient, and prosperous. Within this principle, three specific areas: the regulation of public space, the building rights, and the building codes. And just keeping in mind that the quality of public space often reflects the quality of life in the city. The second principle is urban design, referred to the areas of spatial layout, design of the open space, and the importance of a well-planned street pattern. Going back to the basis and understanding the value of built versus public space, revisiting the principle of mixed-use urban land that works and puts together commerce, leisure in proximity to residents, and designing urban extensions rather than vertical superdensification to manage urban growth. The third principle deals with the financial plan. This is the typical case of the plan in the drawer. The budget, the local authority system of taxation, and other fronts are discussed, focusing urban development trajectories on generating new, innovative means of increasing municipal finances, enticing capital investment, and generating a more prosperous and equitable city for its residents. Recognizes the value of thinking in innovative manners, the old way of financing, thinking that there is always a sponsor, is finished. In October, all this new agenda will be discussed in the Habitat 3 conference that will take place in Quito. The good news is that we are not alone. All the agencies, all the UN agencies and other very important stakeholders are participating in this discussion. The floor was open for any individual wanting to contribute to this agenda. So the system is trying to join communities of practice, finding common ground, forging common purpose, and collaborating on specifically on common practice. Professionals around the world are considering their perspectives, questioning learning patterns, and increasingly understanding the nature of city systems demands more transversal and cross-disciplinary approaches. Under this view, with the goals in mind, to achieve equitable, inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable cities around the world, our program, the CRPP, City Resilience Profiling Program, delivers a forward-looking, multi-sectorial, multi-hazard, multi-stakeholder model for building resilience. But what is resilience? Well, this is a word of fashion right now. Nowhere is common ground that everyone is working on resilience, but probably without a common field or maybe yes, but not well defined. Our program, the CRPP, goes beyond conventional approaches to risk reduction. Risk reduction is mainly reactive, and we are proactive. We deliver a forward-looking, multi-sectorial, multi-hazard, multi-stakeholder model for building resilience that recognizes the complexities and unique value of cities and the inherent interdependencies of each part of an urban system. With the aim of improving the local capacity for resilient development, the program provides with methodologies, metrics, and tools for analyzing the resilience of any urban system, regardless of its size, economy, culture, geographical situation, or hazard profile. You can infer from that our own definition of resilience is based in the conception of the city as a complex system of systems. The perfect analogy is the human body. You cannot think of a resilient human body if you think that your nervous system is ill or your digestive system doesn't work properly. You need all the systems functioning correctly, and then we can start talking about how you get recovered when something happens to you. The cities work in a very similar way. That's why the relations and the interdependencies are crucial to understand how the city will perform under any circumstances. What we do is study the city and then apply different impacts, different hazards that are likely to arrive. From our perspective, sectorial resilience do not constitute by itself a resilient city when developed isolated from the rest of the systems. It's the whole system that defines resilience or the lack of it. And that's pretty strong when you're talking to cities. You're saying that either you are, either you are not. And that very last part, the mayors don't really appreciate. So as an example, It's hard to imagine resilient healthcare or resilience to climate change when basic services such as water, power supply, gas, anything you can imagine, are not guaranteed. Even more clear in the cases of social conflict, political instability, or war when security is concerned. We talk about people. People is at the heart of all of our discourse. Urban resilience is defined, consequently, as the ability of any urban system to absorb and recover quickly, and quickly is quite important, from the impact from any shock or stress, maintaining continuity of function. Why? Absorb and recover. If you absorb and you don't feel the impact, you are well prepared. If you feel the impact, but you don't really have strong consequences, you're well prepared. But if you're not prepared and you receive an impact, then the consequences are the real disaster. The problem is not the earthquake hitting. The problem is the city not being prepared to face it. Quickly. You need to act quickly. It was at New York and the Sandy superstorm. I think the ratio was kind of for every 5 minutes of delay in recovery, there was 1 hour of delay in action. So 5 minutes, 1 hour. Can you imagine when we are talking about days? Maintaining continuity of function, just try to deploy your emergency services when you have no telecommunications. Try to use your telecommunications when there is no electricity. Try to use water. Try to use anything. Nothing works. So all the systems are interconnected. You need to recover all the systems quite quickly, and you need to put them working to the service of emergency, of those responders who will help people that is in danger. In the case of crisis, disaster caused by human proximity to natural hazards, for example, while death and destruction can be wide and deep, the functions of society, including those of local governments, are unmistakably diminished. But solidarity among the survivors, in some cases with the international humanitarian community, can help partially stabilize and restore these functions reasonably quickly. This is the real meaning of resilience, the capacity to act when it's needed. However, external intervention can do a damage when acting under thematic and simplistic assumptions that belie the complexity of city systems. It's well known the value of positive development gains when organizations work together, collaborate, and somehow create something that is greater than the sum of each individual stakeholder brings. But for this to happen, cities have to be at the center, being conscious and prepared of their own risks and capacities, and here is the best help we can provide. It's about awareness of cities. It's something that was mentioned in the previous session. Cities need to know their needs and then ask for a response. And this is valid as well for emergency cases. If you know your city and you know where are the problems, then help will be much more effective. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that in most of cases, and cities only react after the disaster hits. Except maybe in climate change, where social awareness is pushing for politicians to take decisions. Setting aside for a moment the impact of increasing frequency and severity of meteorological events, the rate at which the polar ice cap are melting, the changing temperature of the oceans of the world combined with the global storm systems is beyond alarming. The example this month of September, at least here. It's far less a joke in Panama, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Bangladesh, Maldives, Colombia, Solomons, Fiji, Bougainville, or Alaska, where they are actively addressing forced displacement as a result of sea level rise and coastal erosion. Around 200,000 people is actively relocated, and will be millions in the case of Bangladesh. So we have a lot to do. Certainly, we talk about disasters, the impact of hazards from natural or environmental phenomena, but this is the general background that it's included in the UN Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction and the Climate Conference outcomes. However, our landscape is much vast. You can, if you have the time, if you're interested, just look at the reports that the World Economic Forum publishes every year, and you will see the landscape of real hazards that threaten urban areas is just huge, amazing, scary. Cities are increasing at risk from human-induced hazards ranging from technological, biological, economical, social, and political realms. Not all are catastrophic critical events. Many are just stresses that, if not corrected, lead to disaster. As natural population growth, migration and emerging economies drive the potential positive outcomes of urbanization. They can also catalyze fragility and failure. Displacement is a driver. With globalization easing movement over long distances, urban economies as the pull factor, migration-induced urbanization is a major risk for many cities in the world. In Europe, 80% of the current refugee surge is going to cities globally. Of the 60 million forcibly displaced, 60–70% will end up in cities. Local governments are not prepared. They are not at the table when asylum, quotas, or the gatekeepers see it. And inevitably, the potential for cultural, ethnic, or linguistic urban ghettos emerge. Exacerbating conflict and economic migration patterns, today climate change induced sea level rise, coastal erosion, and intensified weather events are rapidly increasing the momentum of retreat. Tomorrow, the numbers of people fleeing the impact of just these threats will number in the hundreds of millions. This is what we are talking about when talking about urbanization. Those people that will move from their original places to new places that have to be urbanized. So if we do it as we've been doing till now, it will be a disaster. We already know that one of the main menaces to urbanization is urbanization itself. So we have to act. Finally, urbanization, 10.5 billion people on the planet in 2050, 70% in urban areas, double of the current population. Concentration of wealth, risk, and erosion of capacity to manage urbanization drives us to fragility and failure. With this background, it is clear that cities around the world benefit from enhancing normal urban planning, development, and management with resilient-focused action planning that can be included in traditional urban planning but needs to be there. In our case, our program is built under 3 core principles. Protecting people. It's obvious, people at the center, no casualties. When casualties are reduced, then no injured. Second, protecting assets and development gains, reducing the indirect economic losses. And then protecting continuity of function. When everything is safe, then you need to go back to work, you need to go back to work, to a school, you need to recover your life. Nowhere is this more critical than in urban environments exposed to the opposing forces and critical hazards associated with urbanization and climate change. The absence of long-term revisioning of city development strategies, planning out of risk of any type, and building in resilience is an area of focus for this growing community of practice on urban resilience. The common ground for many is supporting local authorities' ambitions to keep their population safe, protect both public and private assets and to maintain critical functions of their cities, regardless of the array of hazards they face now or in the future. To close, maybe just a few concluding remarks. We need to place the impact of imminent threats and hazards in urban development. This is a matter of understanding and building resilience through balanced, integrated, and long-term urban planning, development, and ultimately governance. We need to better understand how cities function, to understand how they fail. This is a matter of both experience and learning in the case of academia, globally. We all need to understand that cities don't develop by sectors or by theme, that finding common ground, common purpose, and common practice to overcome risk and build resilience is not an option, it's mandatory. We all need to grasp the magnitude, not just the impact of climate change and other hazards, but the concentration of risk in urbanization that can rise, and push our leaders in, though, policy and action to take control to harness the positive potential to achieve equitable, inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable cities around the world. Thank you.